When I was 13, 14, I hit a peak in my early career. I was playing for England.
Right.
I got sponsored by Adidas, and I was doing really well. And then because I was an early developer, I think around the 15-year-old mark, that's when other players started to get a bit bigger.
Okay.
And I started to struggle, and that's when the bullying kicked in. And then from then on, that's when I started to struggle going into like the footballing environment, and that's when mental health battles started to kind of occur.
Hello and welcome to the Project Footballer podcast, episode 13. Today we are discussing mental health in youth football, and I am joined by Fabio Sol and Dr. Osu. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for having us.
I'm Daniela Osu, and I am a psychotherapist. I've been working in mental health field for around 20 years. I've been working with the general public and athletes. I've been working from all sorts of levels of athletes, Team GB athletes, down to young children that are involved in football. So mainly with the young children, I've been working with footballers, their parents and coaches too.
And how did you guys meet each other?
Yeah, so Daniela's son, KJ, he's one of my closest friends, and we grew up in school together. So there was a point where I was at Reading FC for 5 years, from 12 years old to 16. And in that time, around 15 or 16, I think, that's when I started to develop some mental health battles. And that's when I approached Daniela to kind of help me in that aspect and get me better.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And can you talk me through that process and that journey?
Yeah. Well, so it was basically all my kind of problems came from on the pitch. Every time I'd step onto the pitch, I'd get a flourish of anxiety. I wouldn't be able to really perform. My head would be like all over the place, and I was bullied as well from a younger age, so that kind of had that effect on me further on. So with Daniela, she kind of helped me work on the self-talk in my head, the beliefs I had, to kind of get a healthier mindset to approach the football in. And that allowed me to enjoy football a whole lot more.
Yeah, the interesting thing is when Fabio reached out, we obviously had a trial session to see if we could work together. And my style is very much I'm listening to the person. So it doesn't matter if somebody's 9, 10, 15, like what Fabio was, or if he's a parent. I don't have one size fits them all. I usually listen to what the problem is, and from an emotional and psychological point of view, and then I design the treatment around it. So that's how Fabio and I hit it off. Basically, I listened to him, understood what was going on as a person and as a footballer, and then obviously we just went from there. We talk a lot. I mean, I hear a lot of talk about mental health. I kind of developed in my head a different sentence, because it is mental training that is necessary and needed out there from a young age, but not just for the children, especially for the parents as well, because I am a parent and I was a parent of a footballer, and nobody prepared me for the journey. So I was out of my depth in a way as a parent.
Yeah.
So yes, I fully empathize with the footballers and with parents, but also interestingly enough, I empathize and understand how coaches could be out of their depth too at times, because I don't think they have a knowledge of mental health or mental training for themselves, and
to pass on
to pass on to the children and the parents, because there is pressure from everywhere.
So you guys have now formed the company FootballersMinds.
Yeah.
And how is that going?
Yeah, it's going really well.
It's going very well. We've had a lot of successes. We had a lot of struggles as well.
Yeah.
Obviously, being new and in a field that is extremely competitive, but also I think it's a field that is quite secretive.
Okay.
So admitting a struggle or even saying I've got a need here could be seen as a weakness.
Yeah, I think the main sort of intention behind creating Footballers Minds was from when I was struggling, I didn't really have anywhere to go to. So if I was when I was in the academy or people at younger ages, we kind of wanted to be that service for those children almost, to have a safe space to talk to, especially with parents as well, because I got a lot of pressures from my own parents who did the best they could, but they only knew what they knew. And so it did affect me going into different sessions, different matches.
So were you an academy yourself?
Yeah, so I was at Reading from 11 till first year scholar.
Yeah, right.
And then from second year scholar, I moved to Oxford and stayed there for 3 years until the summer just gone, where I got released. And yeah.
And so at what point did you begin suffering of anxiety when you played?
Yeah, so that was a little bit when I was about 13, 14. When I was 13, 14, I hit a peak in my early career. I was playing for England.
Right.
I got sponsored by Adidas, and I was doing really well. And then because I was an early developer, I think around the 15-year-old mark, that's when other players started to get a bit bigger.
Okay.
And I started to struggle, and that's when the bullying kicked in. And then from then on, that's when I started to struggle going into like the footballing environment, and that's when mental health battles started to kind of occur.
God. And so what would that bullying be like? What would be some of the examples, if you don't mind explaining?
So it would be I would be seen as kind of like a vulnerable kid because of me being quite small compared to the other kids.
So you were
I was an early developer,
and then gradually other players overtook you.
Yeah, and then,
physically.
Yeah, so then GCSE level, I moved from the school I went to with Daniela's son to the Reading school, which is a football school.
Yeah,
and we were in the school with the age group above from Reading, so there was obviously pressures to kind of compete with year-older boys, and it would kind of get a bit much sometimes when older kids would kind of bully you about in terms of on the pitch and off the pitch, kind of make their mark. So yeah, it would come in different instances, but it would vary. Yeah.
To be things they would say in the changing room.
Yeah, like some physical sometimes. Yeah, it'd be emotionally and physically.
Really?
So it would be quite draining actually to come into like school, especially. But yeah, it was something that I had to learn to deal with.
Do you think, looking back at it now, reflecting, because like you say, the academy environment is so competitive, as much as your teammates, they're probably also looking to understand that there's only so many players that would get scholars, would get pro contracts. So you're also competitors.
Yeah.
Do you see that they were sort of maybe using bullying to try and have another player now removed from their competition?
Yeah, maybe. In hindsight now, I'm obviously going through all that. It's easy for me to say that the only person you should compare yourself with is yourself.
Okay, yeah.
But back then it was probably an ego thing for the other players to try and get a step up or get ahead of other players somehow. So some players would put some people down, or the banter may get a bit too much. But yeah, I think that's the same in any footballing environment. I think.
I don't know if it is.
Well, it kind of varies in degrees, but changing rooms can be very toxic.
Right.
Some changing rooms are great and healthy, but the banter can get a bit too much, and that's when players they don't want to speak up because they may be seen as weak or struggling. So yeah, it can be quite difficult.
Do you think this is an English culture Do you think this is the same in other countries?
I don't know about other countries. I think because the football in England is such at a high level, everyone wants to be at the top, and they'll do anything to get there, which I respect. But obviously, when you're putting other people down as a result of that, that's when it gets too much, and that's when you should reflect on how you should be behaving.
And how did your coaches or the club help with this?
I think at the time, I kind of kept it all to myself, so I kind of suppressed everything.
So exactly what age was it at its worst?
So at its worst was probably 15.
Right.
I used to go to the toilets to cry, to get it all out, so that I could then approach training in a kind of fresher mind. But the coaches didn't really have a lot of information, as I didn't really say anything, which as a young kid I guess is totally reasonable, because you don't want to affect your chances of getting any deal because you're struggling, or I think it was down to me to kind of keep it to myself.
So were the coaches aware of it at all? Because obviously coaches are going to be in the changing room, they're going to be on the training pitch, they're going to be close to it. Did they turn the blind eye?
No, I don't think they turned the blind eye. I think they were aware of the clashes between our age group and the age group above. Eventually I did start speaking to the club therapist, but that was at 17, so that was 2 years after. But yeah, in terms of the coaches, they were quite oblivious, as we didn't really speak up and say anything.
And so remind me again, how old were you when you then reached out to Daniela?
So that was about 16.
Yeah, around that time. Yeah.
Had you been released from Reading at this time?
No, so I left Reading.
So you didn't even get released, you just walked out?
Well, it was a difficult situation. Because of the struggle I was having, I kind of asked to leave. They kind of took it as, they got quite offended, because why would a player want to leave? And I explained that I was really struggling mentally. And then I went back the following season for first year scholar, and I was like, I wanted to kind of stay and fight, but they told me that I wouldn't be playing one game this year because I was wanting to leave. So that's when I decided to leave to go to Oxford.
So they didn't come from the approach to say, oh, we want to help,
Yeah.
you're struggling with mental health. They just took it as, no, you tried to leave, now you're coming back with your tail between your legs type thing. It was more that. Maybe they were thinking, and again, but maybe they were thinking, oh, he's going off to another club. Or do you think maybe they thought that?
Yeah, I think they were quite, as Daniela was saying, that the coaches were quite, or even the highest staff were quite uneducated in terms of that mental health. I remember the academy manager at the time was really unsupportive, and I grew a real big hate towards him, because I was the one struggling and he was the one turning a blind eye. And I guess that happens quite a lot in football. So I guess speaking to parents, that is something that they've got to kind of teach their child from early on, that life is going to be unfair and football's going to be unfair, but it's how you deal with those situations that kind of builds you as a person.
So Daniela, how did you react when Fabio reached out to you?
Well, obviously, when he reached out to me, as I said before, I wanted to understand a little bit more for him as a person what was actually going on. So interestingly, what Fabio just said confirms a little bit of what we were talking about before. Coaches, uneducated in the sense of mental health. Of course, it's not their field, but well, it is in a way, if you think, because they have a duty of care. So we're talking minors here, and the fact that a coach does not pick up the signs, or even if Fabio eventually speaks up and nothing is done. In fact, if anything, it's like another whack, basically. That shows the culture of football, for starters, the pressure that everybody's under. Because I don't look at that in a malicious way. I look at that from a point of view of, we are an academy, we are putting a lot of money into our players. we need to potentially put some of them in the first team or sell them off or whatever. I need to just get rid of something here. I need to get rid of problems, if anything. So that's it's quite a negative culture, if you think, because we're talking human beings. So when Fabio reached out and when he told me what was going on, I thought, okay, hang on a minute. I thought it was like a small issue to start with.
Oh, really?
Well, as a therapist, you always hope that is something quite quick that you can fix really quickly as well.
Was your thinking, oh, he needs to toughen up?
No.
Okay.
When we say toughen up, it's an interesting concept, but very often when people call out and when they reach out, they tell me a little tiny bit of what is going on, and that is usually the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more that keeps the problem going. So that's what Fabio and I did. We started understanding a little bit more what was going on behind, and usually, as I said before, for me, mental health is all about what is your mindset, what is actually going on. It's not only the negative external factors that are influencing you, but usually it's a compound of the situation or situations around me plus what I'm telling myself, so the self-talk. Potentially, not just Fabio's, but the self-talk of a person becomes quite negative. So the vibes are picked up from the environment as well. So if I am, for example, being told that I'm not good enough, then I start telling myself, okay, well, I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough for this. 10 people have told me I'm not good enough. And children, because he was a child, in fact, he was 13, 14, 15, he's still a minor, still a child. Children don't have potentially the resilience or the experience of an adult, so they have nothing to fall on to.
Well, I think sometimes, because that's really interesting, you talk about the inner voice, and for many people, they're almost not aware that they have an inner voice. It's all completely unconscious. And it's such a shift at a time when a person starts hearing that, and then they can potentially start to change it or become aware of that voice.
It's not taught at a young age at all, but I think once you become more advanced in your emotional intelligence, at first it's like, okay, I need to reprogram the way my mind thinks. That's what me and Daniela did. But then it gets to, oh, these thoughts aren't actually true. These negative thoughts in my head, they're not who I am. They're not like a true statement. It's something that I can deal with and not be affected by it.
Wow. So it's the external affects the internal, but we have to reverse that. We have to get the internal, doing what we want it to do to then affect the external. And then when you start seeing things like people saying, oh, you're not good enough, you're not this, you're not this, you can obviously listen to their opinion, but if you're so strong in your inner voice and your inner beliefs, then you understand you can reject it.
Correct.
Is that what you taught?
Fantastic. Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. Spot on. I kind of teach people to become, for lack of a better word, waterproof.
Right.
So yes, it washes over you basically. Mind you, it's not easy to reach that state. Because obviously, it is one of the oldest forms of torture. If you think, just being told something, eventually you start believing and crashing. But reversing that is very powerful. And then it changes your mindset for life.
So Fabio, in the future, at some point, if you have a child who got into academy football, would you want them to go through the same journey that you went through? Obviously, hopefully they don't experience what you experienced, but would you still put them into academy football?
I want my child to be exposed to failure. I think failure is a great thing because it allows you to kind of learn early on what it's like to fail, and like deal with that. Okay.
So, like, what would potentially, would you see it being a Reading problem? Like for instance, if your child said, oh, I want to go and play for Reading, we say, no, you're not going to that club.
No, I wouldn't say that. I think hopefully times like will change, and like that's what we're trying to help with. That we're trying to make a change in this industry. I don't think it's any particular club that's worse than the other. I just think that people responsible for the duty of care, parents, coaches, even the child itself, should be a bit more exposed to the intelligence of what can I learn about myself, because you're going to be living with yourself for the rest of your life, and it's important to learn what's going on in your mind, so you can essentially, I remember Daniela saying to me that I will eventually be my own therapist. Like, I will teach myself how to overcome things and I won't need Daniela. So yeah, that's where I'm from. That's where I'm coming from in that aspect.
So what like coping mechanisms would you give your child to deal with? I mean, do you see, in fact, sorry, let's ask this question. Do you see that kind of bullying and will be is just a part of academy football? Do you think that's just always going to exist in a changing room?
No,
right.
I hope not. But I'd hope that I'd bring my child up in a way where he or she values their own opinion more than others. And they don't get swayed by what other people say, and they can stand strong and tall in what they believe in. So yeah.
And Daniela, how does a parent teach that to their child?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. You know, as I always say, children are like white canvases. Yeah. So you actually put in quite a lot into them. And Fabio touched upon a very important point: teaching children that failing, that unfairness exists, is one of the most important lessons, I think. There is a big culture in England. I'm saying in England, maybe all over the world actually, about the fear of failure. Yeah, so I know a lot of parents who do not put their children through an academy, for example, or any activities for fear of them not being good enough, so failing. I actually think that myself, my son, we failed a few times in our lives in different fields. Failed at, you know, maybe scoring a penalty for my son or something, anything. And it's so healthy, because it's good to feel the crush of emotions, but knowing how to pick yourself up and acknowledge that you are fallible like anyone. So that's a good lesson to have, I think, to know that things may not go right. But if you have a goal, so establishing goals in life is very healthy and important. And the goals need to be revisited, obviously, because, hey, if I want to be, you know, the best therapist in the world, I'm still working on it. Okay, so we may need to reset our goals. And it's all right. It's all right to adjust. And it's all right to, firstly, not believe in limits, but maybe find that, you know, you have a boundary at one point. And that's all right as well. You know, if you cannot be the top player in England, well, is it okay to play in League Two? Yeah, does it make sense? So that's not a failure, because I've seen a lot of parents especially that give a sort of mentality to the child, and that unless you go to, you know, to play for Chelsea, for Liverpool, or, you know, a Premiership club, that's it. You're not playing anymore. And that's a crushing lesson. Rather than saying, hey, you want to be a player? Maybe you play for your local team eventually, and that's all right. So it's enjoyment as well of life, rather than black and white. It's either all good or all bad.
Yeah. What about with that journey where you said you're an early developer, and then you got success at Reading, you're in England. So had your trajectory always been success?
Sorry, what do you mean by that?
Like, so had you always experienced success the whole time? Had you ever had failure up until that point?
Yeah, so because I was an early developer, like up until that age of 14, I had experienced a lot of success.
Right.
Going to England and being sponsored by Ellis. I think in year 7, our school team, we got to the National Cup final, which was in the Medeski Stadium. We lost that, but I experienced a lot of success going to that point. So when I started to experience those failures, it was kind of a big shock, and it was not something I knew how to deal with at all.
Right.
And didn't obviously deal with it very well because of that. So I guess like experiencing those successes were great.
Yeah.
But I think if I were to have a few failures within that would have been also very helpful for me for the future.
In our last episode, we talked about the importance of growth mindset and what parents can do to, when they're praising children, be careful to praise the result and focus a lot more on the process that led to the result.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that subject, Daniela?
I absolutely agree with that. One of my, philosophies is actually growth mindset, which means flexibility. And that's what we were talking about. That's why it's important to be exposed to different results in life. Yeah. So it could be, well, I'm not succeeding very much at that, but that's all right. Average is okay as well. So it's a spectrum, basically. It's not something that is stuck in time, and it's learning. It's a learning culture. I'm learning from my experiences.
Yeah.
So looking at situations as an experience is always good, because obviously you're not boxing something up, so you're not being tied. And that's it's the best that a parent and a child can have, like a growth mindset, a very flexible view of life.
Yeah.
That's honestly, if you have that, if you develop that and maintain that, hardly ever you can disturb yourself.
Yeah.
So the disturbance is short-lived. I'm not saying that people will not feel negative emotions, but the negative emotion will be healthy. Let me give you an example. So if I have failed as a child to get into an academy, me as a parent can encourage that child to say, well, look, hang on, you failed at getting into that academy, but look at the world. I mean, how many possibilities are there? And at that point, sadness is normal. The child cannot be happy. I aimed to get into that academy. I didn't make it. So sadness is a very healthy response at that point. Depression would be a stretch too far. So if I actually stop playing because I didn't make it, if my parents tell me that's all right, rather than that, you'll do ballet, then it becomes like, oh my God, failure is definitely very bad.
Yeah.
And then, depression is okay at that point. So each time I fail, I'll be depressed. Hence, I might not try anything that makes me potentially fail, that, could actually have the outcome as failure. While, as I said, if a parent encourages me to have a good old cry about it, and we all cried together, and we're all quite sad, and we talk about it, and we say, gosh, it wouldn't have been fantastic if you had made it, but you didn't.
Yeah, I think it's like parents sometimes focus on the outcome of the situation rather than addressing that they have done their best and that's all that they can do. It's not to be so focused on if they succeed or fail. It's like, what lesson can I take from this?
And it's about being open about talking about emotions as well as a parent. Often us as parents, and I'm putting myself in it, want to protect the child and not show that we feel something about the situation, when I think it's quite healthy to say, well, I feel very sad. As a parent, I feel really sad, and sad for me and sad for you, because I had hopes as a parent and you had hopes for yourself. So let's talk about it.
In my experience, some of the best players that I've ever worked with have got a real desire to win.
Yeah.
They do not like losing,
I know.
and they feel that pain when they lose.
Yeah.
But the thing is that they will then take it into their training. You know that they're going away and working super hard, and then they're working to avoid that pain to happen again. Do you think that's a healthy approach?
Amazing approach.
Okay.
Amazing, because, that's exactly a growth mindset.
Right.
It's like, yes, my God, I don't like losing.
Yeah.
So I'm going to make, all the possible steps to actually win.
Yeah.
That's a great mindset, because you're not getting crushed by something negative. You're actually taking that as a motivator to, dust yourself up and just off you go. And there may be a time when you feel, very angry and frustrated about it and sad, and that's all right.
Yeah.
It's confined is very much contained. That's great, yeah.
So for a parent, if there is a parent who's developing a footballer, is it okay for them to encourage their child to be annoyed and upset when they've lost, and very happy and adulated when they've won? Is that okay?
That's absolutely fine, because if you respond appropriately to the situation, well, that's fantastic. We don't need to reinvent the wheel as humans. We just need to go with, come on, what's appropriate here?
Yeah. It's not appropriate to be happy when you've just lost a final.
Exactly.
But I think it's important to not like go too down and up when you've experienced a high success or a low failure. I think it's important to kind of keep it steady, but obviously embrace those moments where you are successful.
Well, I think, again, from a coaching point of view, when they've had the highs of winning, if we as coaches can link it back to training, and because you know, ultimately, the more someone practices and does good practice, the better they're going to be. And that's a lot. That they're going to see a lot more development there than just a little game on a Sunday. The game is almost just like the exam. So then what we would do as coaches is say, oh, how good does it feel? We've won. It's so good, isn't it? Well, you know why you won? It's because you worked really hard on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. All that training you did was so strong. And so then we're connecting the emotions to then getting the process right. I did believe that was the correct approach, and the emotion was healthy there, and that sort of like winning attitude was right. When do you see it going too far, though?
Well, you know, winning attitude is always good.
Yeah.
We always, I mean, as humans, we want to succeed, honestly.
Yeah.
Because, you know, not succeeding in the good old days could be quite dangerous. You know, if you don't succeed at keeping yourself safe, it could have been dangerous. So winning, having good emotions is always good. And let's remember that the more healthy, positive emotions we have, the more we open up, you know, neurons to, you know, having neuropaths that are very positive and healthy.
Right.
So it's very good. It's very interesting to feel good. You know, there are a lot of studies on positive mindsets and the psychology of, you know, feeling positive and being positive. So if it is linked up to a real situation, it can cement that kind of neuropath. So it's very good. A feel-good factor is what we all want.
I think a point where it could get a bit too much is if like complacency kicks in. Like if you've just come off a recent win and you feel like you don't need to work as hard to get the next, then that's when it can kind of affect your form or affect your day, like life day to day. So it's important not to get that complacency and always keep that focus.
No, it's a really good point. And I think hopefully as parents and coaches, if we can always connect success to the process, then that helps avoid that complacency setting in. Because the child will, as soon as they do maybe have some failure, and if they're stretching themselves, at some point they should be having that because they don't want it all just easy. Do you feel you could have got stretched a little bit more somehow on your process, on your journey?
Well, because I grew up quite privileged, and I got everything I wanted when I was younger. So I definitely feel that maybe I could have been stretched a bit more, because I learned that success came quite easily. So like work hard and success didn't really marriage when I was younger. But obviously I learned that later on. So I think it's always important to stretch yourself, go outside your comfort zone, because that's where you grow most, when you're uncomfortable.
Daniela, you touched on it a moment ago. I really liked it, where you talked about kind of like how our brains are hardwired for you know, how we survived many years ago. Do you mind just going into a little bit more detail about that, please?
Yes. Well, obviously, nowadays we have developed more the science of understanding ourselves. But I think that we potentially had lost it at one point.
Really?
Because, well, if you think when we didn't have all this knowledge, we survived very well. So obviously, let's say that the majority of people may have had already a mindset that was very helpful. In fact, when certain kind of therapies started to be developed in the 50s, 1950s. I'm talking more about cognitive behavior therapy. The Albert Ellis, who was a psychologist, American psychologist, realized that people that were feeling good and feeling well were not the most privileged of people, in fact, but people that had gone through hardship and learned from it and came out stronger at the other end.
Right.
So that was very interesting because he himself had a fairly tough childhood and he still was one of the happiest men on the planet. So he thought, hang on a minute, there must be something here that had not been understood so far. So now the fact that we are studying it doesn't quite mean that we didn't have it before. So we survived because we are quite resilient. And it's about, what was seen and developed was understanding that it's not necessarily the situations that we are in that create our disturbance, but it's how we view those situations. So, for example, if I was to lose my job, it is not the loss of my job that creates my depression, but it's how I view that loss. Okay. Does it make sense?
It does. I suppose, like, I'm thinking like millions and millions of years ago. We're walking across the plains. Maybe the people at those times would be feeling terrible potentially because there's a lion attacking their tribe or something. I don't know, just like a random example like that. So then that emotion of feeling the pain of someone in their tribe getting eaten by that lion causes them to now go and build a fire and build a hut to protect them, and now the tribe is now safe. So the emotion has saved that group, and then they've then procreated and they're the ones who've then survived. And so I suppose that's kind of like what I'm getting at, of like how the emotions are there to protect us, and they are healthy, and they're part of our survival spirit.
It's like I think, well, back in those days, it was like if you saw like a lion or whatever, it would be that anxiety to kind of fight or flight. Whereas now we don't obviously have that extreme threat of a lion trying to kill us. So it's like, well, if there's a threat, it's an anxiety telling us maybe we need to change something, but it's not as big as, back in those days. That's where it's kind of like been programmed from. Yeah,
it's absolutely like that, in the sense that it's a very, very good question that you asked. And it's, in those days, correctly, the emotion was actually leading us to change our behaviors. So the behavior was, as you said, building something safer. So we learned from it. We became much more resilient. So we actually knew that a negative situation was not the end of it. We can suffer in the short term, but what about the longer term? What are we doing about it? And that's exactly what was studied again in the 1950s. How can we get back to that? Because that's how we survived. So we developed via our own emotions ways out of it. And that's how we came to nowadays. As Fabio touched upon, well, we don't live in a war zone, thankfully. So those big anxieties, the fight or flight, are not something that we experience in a sort of, there is no real physical danger now. But we've turned that into an ego danger. So the threat is to my own self. So, for example, if I'm not performing at the academy, oh my God, it's the end of the world. Okay, so that's how now we perceive threats. We think it's me, and everybody's looking at me, the spotlight is on me, so I crash as much as, the academy not wanting me becomes my lion. So that's how we've kind of, turned it. We've created danger when, in fact, if the academy, as an example, doesn't want me, it's not really eating me alive, is it?
You're going to survive, but your hopes of becoming a footballer might be dashed. But every footballer that we've had on this show, this podcast, they've talked about their journeys, and they all experience rejection along the way.
Of course.
It's part of the process. And I think that parents and coaches definitely need to do more to help players understand that that's expected. and then it's then, okay, you've pushed yourself, you've stretched yourself this far, right? You've now hit a bit of a ceiling. Now maybe that there's areas that you now need to work on, or things need to change, or you need to drop down a level. That's how people sort of find their level.
Yeah.
But I think it's definitely underappreciated, potentially, like the mental sort of pressures that puts on people when they're going through that process.
Yeah.
What does it look like where it goes too far and a player now is going into maybe like depression? What different, like for ages, like what does that look like for a parent and child?
Well, it does depend, as you said. I mean, is it something that is contained, short-lived? You know, if it's a moment in which, for some reason, I just, the loss is too big for me to digest.
Right.
Then I can go into depression. Depression is something that, I mean, is it clinical depression or is it not? Let's not go too deep here. But depression is something that we can all experience at times, and it can be healthy in a way, because when you were talking about how did we evolve, depression was what we felt when the lion was eating us alive.
Okay.
In a short time frame, because if a lion is eating me alive,
Yeah.
do not want to feel it. Okay,
Right.
so that's my last port of call. After that is all gone.
I see.
So that's the anxiety before was making us run. When the lion catches up with us and is going to eat us alive, then I just want to be numb. And that's how depression is manifesting itself nowadays, in a way. I mean, obviously, it's a very complex disorder, but the numbness and the kind of demotivation and feeling flat comes from those days. So
that's kind of what
I'm protecting myself.
Yeah, that's kind of what that I experienced when going through it. I didn't really feel a lot of emotion, and when I did, it would be like all out in one go. So like a period of crying or just anger, it would really drain me after those episodes, and that's when I'd just crash again, and it would kind of like just repeat. Like you don't really want to put yourself out there in a social environment, or be around friends or family, because you just don't want that hassle of explaining like what's going on.
Were your parents aware of what was happening?
I think eventually they were. I did suppress a lot, like going through those days, but it wasn't a lot of awareness around me from what was going on. So like my friends at school, they didn't really have an idea that I was going through anything. And when I was around friends, I would like put a mask on. I'd be happy, I'd laugh, but deep down it would be like just hurt. I'd just be painful, just not feel anything. So I think the depression can vary like to each person, but yeah.
And how big of a problem do you think mental health in youth football is?
It's a fairly big problem.
Is it?
Undetected at times. Sorry, exactly for the reasons that Fabio was talking about. Firstly, the player himself or herself and or the parents may not understand the signs.
Yeah.
We're not, as a society, well educated in picking up the signs and picking up potentially from before. Okay, it is a slippery slope. It doesn't happen in a day or two. It's a continuous process that will happen within weeks or months. And unless the person is well educated to understand what is going on, or the people around, well, it goes undetected till potentially it's too far gone. Yeah. There are ways to pick it up, of course, and there are ways to reverse it if you pick it up in time. In fact, may I say that sometimes with people in my vicinity, like close family or friends, if I can see it quickly enough, I can just quickly help.
Yeah.
So obviously you need to be trained to a level that potentially the person, the layman, is not. But nevertheless, it's a phase that we all recover from, and parents can enter that as well, not knowingly, because obviously they may have put a lot of hopes, not for themselves necessarily, but because the young one, the child that they have, wanted to succeed in a certain field or in a certain situation. So they can actually feel it themselves without knowing what is going on. Why, am I not motivated to go to work today, and feeling a bit flat. So that could be there for everybody.
When you say that it's a big problem, like how many players in an academy would be suffering?
Well, generically, we could see at least 10%
Really?
of players, yes. Now, does it hit football players less than the general population? Probably, yes. But probably even deeper when it does.
Yeah, I mean,
more
we
confined, but deeper.
We can see a couple of players who actually committed suicide because of those problems. There was the Man City young player, Jeremy. So, I mean, it is a big problem. It is something that needs to be dealt with, and I think people need to get better at teaching themselves of what to expect.
Understand, but I mean, there might be some parents who are thinking, I wouldn't want to actually send my kid to an academy because if 10% are suffering, like, what are you saying? Are you saying that 10% you think are actually suffering from depression?
They probably will at one point or another.
All right.
As Fabio said, it's not like a continuum. It's not like all the time. I mean, when they're very young, potentially they might not, but they might. You see, I think, and I don't have figures to prove this, but I think that children suffer with depression more than what we think.
Right.
Because they have losses at a young age and they go undetected. There aren't many studies on, for example, little Joe Bloggs gets a brother that is born when he's 5 or 6, when he's starting his journey into football. That shifts his position in the family already. So that's the first big loss that a very young player may have when the parents are torn in between looking after a baby and looking after your needs. So the children can suffer with depression completely undetected. And then again, because it's such a secretive world, the numbers that we have nowadays do not reflect reality. As much as the generic figures tell us that about 25% of the population will suffer with depression at one point or another, even that figure is definitely not correct, because doctors do not have the obligation to disclose their figures, and people usually don't report it.
Yeah, how are you going to get figures when people aren't speaking out?
Yeah.
But definitely at a younger age is when they're most vulnerable to creating these negative beliefs, and that is the most important age where they should be getting taught. So yeah.
But also when we talk about depression, which has it's like a vast spectrum of intensity.
Yeah.
But frequently, I would think that one of the biggest problems for players, for footballers, especially at academy level, is anxiety to start with. So because of their fears of failure, fears of non-performing, fear of not being good enough, fear of being dropped, fear of X, Y, and Z, endless fears. When you imagine that you're carrying a rucksack and you're putting, a little bit into that rucksack every day, so fears of something today which are unresolved because I am not talking about it, or because maybe my parents are afraid of that very thing and I heard them talking. So you keep on filling the rucksack, eventually becomes too heavy, and that's when depression hits. I mean, we're talking about all these negatives.
No, but it's helpful to understand because, like, for instance, we talked earlier, like some of those fears are necessary to achieve success.
Of course.
Because the player should, in theory, be fearful that someone will come and take their spot.
Yeah.
Because if they don't have a fear, then...
Complacency.
Exactly. Maybe potentially they stop training as much and they stop working as hard.
Yeah. So what's the fine line? That's what I'm hearing here. There is a fine line. So if I have the knowledge, I want to call it knowledge rather than anxiety. If I have the knowledge, and I remember as a parent being told by the coach, okay, this year is going to get tougher for your son because the kids are competing for spots in the team.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, oh gosh, because I was uneducated as a parent, my husband and I had no knowledge of the football world somehow, and our son wanted to be a footballer. So the kind of understanding here is, you don't know where you're at, basically. So the journey becomes quite complex. Okay, so there's a complexity that we need to unravel and understand, basically. Yeah.
But then I'm still not feeling like I'd know. If I've got a kid, I don't have any children, but if I did and they were sort of becoming a
Where's
footballer,
the fine line here?
Yeah, I want to allow them to have some fear, but when do I know that the rucksack is full?
It's full. Okay, as I was saying, as a parent, sometimes it's difficult to define. Let's define it together. Having pressure and having that kind of, you call it fear, fantastic, let's go with that. Having a little bit of fear is really good, as long as we do not catastrophize. So as long as we actually say, that's why the complexity comes in, as long as we don't say, oh my God, if you don't get that spot, that's the end of your world. Okay, that will be crushing. So that's when we create anxiety with that fear. If I have the fear of not getting that spot, it's all right. What can I do about it?
Yeah, it's like the fear of not getting the spot, but being okay or accepting that you may not get it, and you can deal with the consequences.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
There's
that resilience.
Yeah. There's a parent that I speak to. I speak to a lot, and his kid is amazing, and I'm always sort of like saying, oh, how do you do, what do you do? This parent talks about how he ensures that his children feel so loved. They feel so loved and supported, and they know no matter what, if they fall, everyone's going to be around them to pick them up and support them. And then that means that these children go and do the most sort of brave things because they've got very little fear of failure. They've got so much inner confidence, and they do go and work hard, and the parents set very high expectations for the children, but at the very sort of deep root, they understand that they can fall and it's going to be okay.
Yeah. That's exactly it. It's knowing that you can put yourself way out your comfort zone, but you've got that like support network around you as well as yourself to be okay with the consequences and accept whatever the outcome. So
amazing. Well, so you formed this company, FootballersMinds. What other types of work that you do with parents and players and clubs?
We do a lot of workshops, obviously, and in the workshops it depends a little bit of what either an academy or the the structure wants. So we can focus on emotional regulations.
Okay.
So we're regulating emotions because, as we've been talking a lot about feelings, and we all feel as humans, but it's good to be able to regulate it. So if there was anxiety, if there was fear, if there was anger, frustration, how do we contain it to a level that is workable? So exactly what you were asking before, are fears okay? Of course they are, to the level that, then I can contain and not catastrophize. Again, what about if I feel angry and frustrated? Good, but let's have that not taking over my life. And let's contain the self-talk as well. So emotional regulations, we do quite a lot of different mindsets, growth mindset as well. We do the conscious and unconscious mind, because something we didn't get into today, but obviously we do something quite consciously, and other acts or even feelings that I have could have been unconscious. So me not knowing how I created that, and that's part of programming the mind.
And will you even do that for children like under 12?
Of course.
Really?
Yeah. I developed a program because I did work for a few seasons with AFC Wimbledon, from under 9s. So from the moment they start the academy, that's what we did for a few seasons.
And what sort of techniques would you use?
Well, quite a lot of techniques, quite simple, from the under 9s to the under 12s, in fact. But funnily enough, they were the most responsive, in the sense that so open, so candid, so honest.
Yeah, but that's not even surprising.
No.
That's expected at such a young age.
so knowledgeable as
Yeah.
well of themselves and what was going on around them, they became more boxed up from 12 onwards when pressure really came on, when they started secondary school, so everything became serious.
I see.
Yeah.
So when you say, sorry, I want to just sort of like really dig into the techniques. So maybe like parents can look into that more.
Yes.
But would it be just like talking to them to ask them about what their sort of inner voice says?
Yes, we were concentrating a lot on the self-talk.
Right.
And as I said, at that young age was mostly quite nice self-talk. And interestingly, I heard from them and from their parents, the parents' self-talk and talk to the children was very healthy too. So it's very encouraging. But we were also looking at more mindful-like techniques as well, to be aware of yourself, your body, developing some breathing techniques, grounding techniques, and also techniques on how to take on failure.
Yeah, and just on that as well, we have a service with buddy ups, so that's where myself speaks to more the younger age groups, so like those 10-11-year-olds, and myself and Daniela have done a few sessions with particularly this one 11-year-old who really found like the advantages in what we were doing, in the sense that before the sessions he would really struggle with his like inner dialogue and self-talk, bearing in mind he was 11, and after he found that like the techniques we were speaking about like really helped him. So like things like visualizing like what he wants to achieve, and being more aware of what his like head is telling him, like in the most simplest ways, can be really effective for such a young kid.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we work on the mind. I mean, Fabio is great with buddy. We call them buddy ups, in the sense that he talks as a mentor to younger players. But what we do, we are very creative with the children. Sometimes we have a technique in mind, but they tell us how they want to put the technique in practice, which is fantastic, because I, as a therapist, can actually, go very high level and maybe not homing in sometimes, and they're telling me, "Oh, can we do it this way?" Yeah, of course you can, and that's it's a good relationship to have.
No, it's fascinating. It's fascinating to hear. In terms of like, when would a parent need to sort of say, "Oh, I need to reach out to you guys"? Like, at what stage?
Prevention is good.
Prevention.
Yes, exactly. It's am I more successful treating an issue or preventing it? Well, the answer is, if we can prevent it, why not? Yeah. So obviously, if there's an issue there, please reach out to us, and we will be able to treat any issues.
But hang on, sorry. So, so almost all parents should be getting therapy for their children. Is that your belief?
Yes. When we say it's not therapy that I would just give, because therapy is given on an issue.
Right.
Okay. There is an issue. Let's treat it.
Mental training.
Yeah, it's mental training. So beforehand, it's good to have a mental training, in the sense of, how do we deal with fears? How do I deal with a young one that potentially will feel too much pressure? Or how do I deal in preventing that frustration becoming my child's negative self-talk?
It's like, how do you equip your child with all the correct techniques, so that when they do experience those failures, they have like a knowledge on what they can do? Especially at such a young age, it is so important that they get those like healthy beliefs to like take on into adulthood as well.
So how many sessions would you advise that a parent does? Let's say you've got a parent who's got a kid at an academy who's 6 or 7. How much should they do?
Probably a handful of sessions. What would be
over the course of a year?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. Even more ideal would be potentially, because there isn't an issue yet, or we're trying to educate. Let's call it education, mental training and education. It would be good to have workshops for all the parents together to pick up on a few techniques. And obviously, if then there is a need for a parent or a set of parents to go a little bit deeper, then it's when we can give more personalized sessions. But the group sessions, the group workshops, it's quite ideal, because
for prevention.
For prevention.
Oh, so you'd go to, let's say it's a grassroots club, and the grassroots coach or team secretary would reach out to you and say, I've coordinated all these parents, we want to do some mental resilience training.
Yeah.
Can we do a session with our 10 players?
Yeah.
And you would do a 2-hour workshop. Would that be what it would be like?
Yeah. And then after, if the kid or the child or even the parent wanted to, have more personalized sessions, then that's when like the one-to-ones with Daniela would come in, or if the kid wanted more mentoring, then that was when I would come in. But that was how.
Or we do a combination as well. We've done sessions like, if we give a child who is in need of some help, mainly with confidence. I mean, a lot of children, they call it confidence, and it is a combination of a few things. So we may do half and half, more therapeutic from me, more mentoring like from Fabio, and it's usually a winning combination.
The FA have the 4-corner model, and they have technique, they have the physical corner, they have the sort of social corner, and then the mental corner. So it is probably an area that maybe gets neglected because parents sort of are very sort of visual, and they're like, oh, my child's running fast and they control the ball well.
But what's going inside?
Absolutely, and then this other area is just being neglected, and then it's only then far later on that they haven't got that resilience, or they're not able to like deal properly with failure.
I know you were asking me before about figures, because sometimes it's good to have some numbers on the table. Apparently, a few studies have actually proven that about 90% of the success rate for an athlete comes from mental, not from physical. And these are our top athletes who have actually completed these surveys. So they have said that 90% of their outcome as an athlete is mental. So the 10% is physical. Now, I mean, is it an accurate appraisal? That I don't know. But if a professional athlete tells me that, then I'm listening. So mental health and mental stability, so mental training counts for quite a lot.
And sorry, one of my last questions, I think it's been an amazing conversation. I think very, very beneficial to parents, probably in a subject that they've never really delved into at such detail, I would imagine, because it's not really talked about in football. But social media in football, in youth football especially, what influence or what impact do you think that has on mental health?
I think as a footballer myself, I think I've realised that being on social media can be very beneficial for some things, but it can cause you to compare yourself to like what other players are doing, because on social media it's usually like all the good things going on in your life, and then you compare it back to your life, and if you're not in the team or not in the squad, you're kind of comparing your situation to theirs. But it's important to realise that like your journey is different to everyone else's. But social media can be a difficult place for some players.
I mean, my experience with social media, very much what Fabio is saying. I've been working at a different level completely with referees and assistants in Greece, led by Mark Clattenburg. So for them, social media is like crashing. Okay, and we're talking, professional, referees and assistants. And the healthiest of them actually are switching that off a few days before the match and a few days after. So that's the impact, basically, even at that level, that social media can have on your well-being and emotions.
Well, we just did an episode previously, which was just all around that subject. It's a new world, isn't it? It's ever changing, but I'm sure there's definitely impacts for people on their mental health with social media. Absolutely. Guys, thank you so much for your time. I think that's been an amazing conversation, and like I said before, really beneficial to parents. So thanks again. And if parents want to reach out to you, how can they do that?
Well, they can reach us via our website. They can send us an email. There are telephone numbers there as well, and it is FootballersMinds.com.
Brilliant. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.